Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I want you to imagine a billionaire benefactor for a second.
Okay.
And this guy decides to build a massive state-of-the-art hospital. I mean, he spares absolutely no expense.
Right.
The architecture is breathtaking. The medical technology is decades ahead of its time. And, the staff is unparalleled.
Top of the line, everything.
Yeah, but here is the catch. He builds this hospital specifically to treat the very criminals who burned his own estate to the ground.
Wow.
And he does not fund this operation out of, a reluctant sense of duty. And he certainly doesn't do it because he expects these criminals to pay him back.
Because they can't.
Right, they have nothing. He does it out of sheer, unadulterated delight.
That is a wild concept.
It is, because when we use the word love in our modern vocabulary, we usually mean a reaction.
Right.
We see something beautiful, we feel an affinity for it, and we call that love.
Yeah, it's very transactional.
Totally reactive. But when you step into the world of 17th century English theology, that flimsy reactive definition is just completely obliterated.
It really is. We are looking at a landscape of thought that treats divine affection with this staggering, terrifying precision.
Yeah.
It is an architecture of grace that operates on a cosmic scale, but at the same time, it dictates the precise mechanics of what you should be thinking about while sitting in traffic on a Tuesday afternoon.
Which brings us to our deep dive for today. We're examining the writings of John Owen, specifically from his 1684 work, The Glory of Christ.
Yes, specifically chapter 5.
Right, chapter 5, which focuses on the glory of Christ in his love.
And what Owen does here is dismantle any vague, fuzzy sentimentality we might hold about divine affection.
He really takes a sledgehammer to it.
He does. He forces the reader to trace the origins of a rescue mission, one executed by the Father and the Son from before the foundation of the physical universe.
And we are not just doing a historical survey today, you guys. We are looking at the intricate mechanical realities of how this rescue mission actually works.
Yeah, the actual mechanics of it.
So, Owen insists we cannot even begin to grasp the actions of the Son until we trace the stream all the way back to its absolute origin point.
The very beginning.
Right. And he calls the love of God the Father the eternal disposing cause of the whole work of redemption.
Now, to modern ears, disposing cause sounds like dry academic jargon.
It really does. It sounds like something from a legal document.
Yeah, but in the 17th century, those words carried massive philosophical weight.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, they draw heavily from classical Aristotelian categories of causality. A disposing cause is the ultimate reason a thing is set into motion.
Okay.
Think of it like the architect's mind, before a single line is drawn on a blueprint, is the absolute first spark.
Got it.
But Owen couples this with another phrase to show what this love is not. He states that this eternal act of election had no moving cause outside of God himself.
And a moving cause is different from a disposing cause.
Very different. A moving cause is something external that prompts a reaction.
Give me an example of that.
So if you see a starving child on the street, the child's misery is the moving cause that prompts your charity.
Ah, okay. The cause of your action was outside of you.
Spot on. But God had no moving cause. There was nothing in humanity, absolutely nothing foreseen in us, that triggered this eternal decree.
Which is heavy. But this is where we have to pause and confront a massive theological tension in Owen's framework.
Oh, for sure.
Because the text explicitly states that God's eternal act of election did not contain an actual approval of the state and condition of those elected.
Right.
How does a perfect, holy God look at a group of individuals, find their state entirely unacceptable, refuse to approve of their condition, and yet simultaneously elect them in an act of supreme love?
It is a huge paradox.
It sounds entirely contradictory to the way the human mind processes affection.
Well, the human mind struggles with it because we conflate election with validation.
Oh, that is a great point.
We assume that if someone chooses us, they must see some hidden spark of worth, some redeeming quality that others missed.
Like a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, precisely. But Owen shatters that assumption. He clarifies that the decree of election designs the basis on which a people would eventually be accepted.
Which is the future mediation of Christ.
Yes. It does not look down the corridor of time, spot a person with a good heart, and say, well, I approve of that state, therefore I choose them.
So there is no foreseen goodness.
None. The decree designs the mechanism of their future acceptance, despite their natural state being completely repulsive to divine holiness.
Which completely annihilates the concept of human boasting.
Totally destroys it.
If you grasp this, you cannot point to your own faith, your own good works, or even your own repentance as the reason you were chosen.
No, you can't.
Those things are the downstream effects of the decree. They are not the cause of it.
Right, they flow out of it.
But if God is not validating us, and if he finds our state unacceptable, why does Owen insist on calling this eternal decree love?
That's a fair question.
I mean, it sounds more like a cold, calculating administrative decision.
And Owen anticipates that exact friction. He gives distinct reasons why this decree must be categorized as love, and it is rooted entirely in the nature of God.
Okay, what is the first reason?
The first is that it is an act suited to God's glorious excellency. The scriptures say God is love.
Right.
Therefore, the very first outward motion, the absolute first egress of his divine properties toward creation, must be an act of communicative love.
So it has to align with who he is.
Yeah, if you could somehow peer into the infinite treasury of the divine attributes, you would find no other attribute to which this eternal decree could be ascribed.
Wow.
It originates in love because God is love.
And what is his second reason?
The second reason is purely logical. Whatever good is done to anyone altogether undeserved with a design for their eternal advantage must be an act of love.
It can have no other source.
Exactly.
Because there is no return on investment.
Right.
Going back to that billionaire benefactor building the hospital for the arsonists, he gains nothing from them.
Not a single thing.
The cause of the generosity is locked entirely within the character of the benefactor.
Furthermore, Owen points out that the sheer scale of the fruits produced by this decree proves its origin.
Yeah.
The massive, inconceivable effects of redemption, justification, adoption, eternal life, they could only flow from a spring of infinite love.
So we have this eternal spring acting as the disposing cause.
Yes.
But to truly understand the sheer force of this rescue mission, we have to look at the catastrophe that necessitated it.
We have to look at what was actually lost.
Right. We have to look at what was lost in the fall of humanity.
And Owen describes the original state of creation, noting that humanity was made in the image of God.
And he uses a phrase that just stops you in your tracks.
He says the life of their souls was love to God.
That is incredible. The animating principle of human existence was not cellular biology. It was affection directed back at the Creator.
It was a preparatory state for the eternal life of heaven. Every breath they took, every thought they possessed, was an uninterrupted communion with divine goodness.
But from the state, humanity fell by sin into a state of complete enmity with God.
Enmity.
Yeah, enmity is a terrifying word.
It really is.
We aren't talking about humanity just becoming indifferent to God. We aren't talking about a minor infraction of some cosmic rule book.
No, enmity implies active, hostile rebellion.
Right.
It is a total, woeful catastrophe, comprehensive of all temporal and eternal miseries.
The mirror was shattered.
Yeah, the animating principle of love was replaced by an animating principle of hatred toward the Creator.
Okay, but if the fall resulted in total enmity, if the patients actively burned down the hospital, why not just leave them in the ashes?
Yeah, why bother?
I want to push back on the necessity of this rescue for a second. Why did this specific catastrophe warrant divine intervention?
Because Owen makes a very sharp distinction here, a distinction between fallen humanity and fallen angels.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
The distinction hinges on the concept of recoverability. Recover? Yes. Owen argues that notwithstanding this woeful catastrophe, human nature was, on many accounts, recoverable to the enjoyment of God.
So there was something salvageable.
A creature made in the image of God, even though fallen into absolute misery, retained a structural capacity for restoration.
But the angels didn't.
No, they didn't.
The text mentions Christ did not pity the angels that fell. That is a chilling boundary line for divine compassion.
It is a severe reality. The angelic nature, once fallen, was irrecoverable.
Why is that?
We can look at the theological mechanics of this. Angels fell from a state of pure immaterial existence without a federal head.
Meaning they represented only themselves.
Right. When an angel rebelled, it was a definitive, instantaneous, and permanent calcification of their will against God.
Wow.
There was no capacity for representation or substitution. Therefore, as Owen states, all compassion ceases toward those whose condition is irrecoverable.
So they were locked in.
Permanently.
Yeah.
But mankind was different. We fell as a race in a representative head, Adam.
We exist in time and matter.
Yes. We lay under the eye of Christ in our misery, utterly incapable of saving ourselves, yet structurally capable of being saved by a substitute.
We were the proper object of divine compassion.
Exactly.
And that sets up the internal disposition of the Son. The Father has made the eternal decree. Humanity has fallen into a recoverable state of enmity, and the Son responds.
And Owen outlines a progression in the Son's reaction.
Let's hear it.
The very first act of Christ's love toward us in our misery was pity and compassion. He saw the distress of a creature made in the divine image, and his love acted as pity.
But pity is only the initial reaction, right?
Yeah, Owen takes us into a much more intense reality. Because the Son looked on us as recoverable. His love worked in and by delight.
Delight.
Yes. He references the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, describing the eternal wisdom of God rejoicing in the habitable parts of the earth, taking inconceivable delight in the prospect of delivering mankind to the glory of God.
So let's distinguish between pity and delight because they are vastly different emotional engines.
Oh, entirely different.
It's the difference between seeing a stranded motorist with a flat tire and feeling bad for them versus a master mechanic walking through a junkyard and finding a rusted-out 1967 Shelby Mustang.
I love this analogy.
You feel pity for the motorist. Right?
Yeah.
You might even pull over to help.
Sure.
But the mechanic feels actual delight when he sees the ruined Mustang. He doesn't just feel sorry for the rust. His eyes light up because he eagerly anticipates the restoration process.
Yeah.
He loves the work of restoring it to its original glory.
That is it. Pity addresses the immediate suffering, but delight anticipates the final glory.
So Christ wasn't just doing chores.
No, Christ did not view humanity as a burdensome chore assigned by the Father. He viewed the rescue as a masterpiece to be restored.
But Owen anticipates the immediate skepticism of the human mind here.
He does.
Because why would a being who is eternally blessed, entirely self-sufficient, needing absolutely nothing to add to his own joy, concern himself so intensely with our forlorn condition? The mechanic might need the Mustang to show off at a car show, to bolster his reputation, but God needs nothing.
God possesses absolute aseity.
Right, complete self-existence and self-sufficiency.
So, his delight cannot be rooted in a need for companionship or a desire to fill a void.
Then where does it come from?
The cause of this compassion and delight was solely the infinite goodness of his own nature. There was not the least inducement from us.
Because human love is almost always rooted in some form of lack or need.
Yeah, we love because we find something in the other person that completes us or satisfies a desire.
But Christ's delight was generated entirely from within, his own infinite fullness overflowing.
It is a love of pure, unprovoked origination.
Okay, so having internal delight is one thing, but executing the rescue mission requires facing incomprehensible obstacles.
Massive obstacles.
The text talks about a proposal made to the Son concerning the way of our recovery, and it says this way involved great difficulties and perplexities.
Specifically, perplexities to his person as it was to be constituted.
Which brings us to the absolute necessity of the incarnation.
Yes. To the divine nature, nothing is grievous. God cannot suffer. God cannot bleed. God cannot die.
Right.
But the mechanics of this rescue mission required suffering. It required the payment of a debt through death.
So he had to take on flesh.
Therefore, the Son had to take another nature, a human nature, in which he could undergo the staggering difficulties of this work.
And the phrase Owen uses here is devastating.
Which one?
He says the Son was required to pity us until he had none left to pity himself when he stood in need of it.
Oh, yeah. That is a heavy line.
He had to relieve our sufferings by suffering the exact wrath that we should have suffered.
Yes.
But I want to bring some heavy resistance to Owen's argument right here.
Go for it.
The text says, his love rose on this proposal like the waters of a mighty stream against opposition. He supposedly says, lo, I come to do thy will, O God. It is my delight to do it.
Right.
But look at the historical execution of this mission. Look at the Garden of Gethsemane. You have a man sweating blood experiencing hematidrosis, which is a physiological reaction to profound terror. Lethal terror.
Yes.
He is pleading for the cup to pass from him. That does not look like delight.
It really doesn't.
Is Owen glossing over the psychological and physical trauma of the human nature just to protect a clean theological thesis about divine delight?
Not at all. Owen is not glossing over the terror. He is holding two massive realities in perfect tension.
Okay, explain that tension.
The delight belongs to the eternal purpose and the ultimate outcome, the deliverance of mankind and the glorification of the Father.
And the terror.
The terror and sorrow belong to the finite human nature confronting infinite divine wrath.
So both are fully real.
Yes. And the metaphor of the mighty stream actually answers your objection.
How so?
When a massive river hits an immovable boulder, the water does not stop, nor does it placidly flow around it.
The pressure increases.
Exactly. The water rises, churning violently until it crashes over the obstacle with even greater force.
Oh.
The difficulties, the absolute terror of the cross, the prospect of having no pity left for himself, these were the boulders.
They didn't stop him?
No, they did not deter him. They provided the immense resistance against which the sheer force of his eternal love surged forward.
And to give that mighty stream a physical channel through which to flow into human history, the text references Hebrews chapter 10.
Right, stating that a body was prepared for him.
A human nature made entirely his own.
And this prepared body was filled with grace in an unmeasurable way, acting as the fitting instrument to actuate his eternal love.
The divine love required a mortal instrument to carry out the suffering.
Yes.
So when we talk about the divine person taking on a human body, we are stepping into the territory of the hypostatic union.
We absolutely are.
And we aren't just throwing around seminary jargon here for the sake of it. We're talking about the exact physical and spiritual mechanics of how the infinite connects to the finite without destroying it.
Which is mind-bending.
It is. How does an infinite divine person operate a mortal human body without overwriting its humanity?
That is the big question.
If you are listening to this and wondering how this specifically changes your understanding of who Jesus is, how does Owen break down the actions across these two natures?
Well, Owen insists that the glorious love of Christ does not consist exclusively of the eternal actings of his divine person.
Okay.
When he exercised this love in time and space, he was man also, not God only.
So both natures are active.
Yes. The acts of love in these two distinct natures are infinitely different from one another, yet they are all acts of one and the self-same person.
We have to keep the natures entirely distinct.
Right, without mixture, confusion, separation, or division. But the person is completely united.
Give me the precise breakdown from the text on how these acts differ.
Owen sets up a brilliant pairing here. He says, assuming our human nature was an act of inexpressible love.
Right.
But that assumption was an act of his divine nature only because it took place before his human nature even existed.
Ah, that makes sense. The human nature could not choose to be assumed.
Exactly. The pre-existent divine person chose to assume it.
So the pre-incarnate Son acts in his divinity to take on flesh.
Yes.
Then what is the corresponding act on the human side?
Laying down his life for us, offering himself as a sacrifice.
Okay.
This was an act of the human nature because only the human nature possessed blood to shed and a life to lay down.
The divine nature cannot expire on a cross.
Right. God cannot die.
But the assuming of the flesh and the bleeding on the cross were acts of his single divine person.
Precisely. This is the doctrine of the communication of properties.
And that is why the scriptures can use language that just shatters our normal categories.
Yeah. Stating that God laid down his life for us, or that God purchased the church with his own blood.
The blood belongs to the human nature.
But the human nature belongs to the divine person.
And that is the mechanism that gives the cross its infinite efficacy.
It has to be that way.
Because if it were just a perfect human man dying, the sacrifice would be finite.
It might cover the sins of one other human.
Right, but it could not cover an eternal debt for a multitude.
Exactly.
And if it were just God, there could be no death at all and thus no payment because divinity is immortal.
It requires the infinite value of the divine person operating through the mortal instrument of the human nature to absorb an infinite wrath in a finite amount of time.
That is just incredible to think about.
And Owen states that beholding this specific glory, the intricate, staggering reality of the one person acting in love through two distinct natures is a massive part of the blessedness and triumph of the saints in heaven.
That is the intellectual and spiritual feast of eternity.
It is.
He writes, the illustrious brightness wherewith this glory shines in heaven cannot be conceived or expressed by us.
Right.
But instead of leaving us in awe of something we cannot fully grasp yet, he immediately pivots.
He brings it right down to earth.
He brings this massive cosmic architecture crashing down into our daily psychology.
Yeah, he warns that we must labor to continually prepare our minds for such heavenly contemplations.
And he diagnoses exactly why we fail at it.
He identifies a severe enemy to this contemplation, which is the habitual course of our minds.
Habitual course.
Yes, he argues that a carnal, sensual mind, or a mind filled entirely with earthly things, is fundamentally incapable of retaining a due sense of this love.
It is diametrically opposed to the required holy composure.
Spot on.
But, if this two-natured cosmic rescue mission is as massive and vital as Owen claims, why is it so incredibly hard for me to keep my mind
Yeah.
focused on it for more than 5 minutes?
It is a universal struggle.
We live in an era of relentless notifications, fluctuating economic markets, and just constant digital noise.
It is overwhelming.
Owen says most people rove up and down in their thoughts, led by their affections into the corners of the earth.
Right.
Is he just critiquing sinful behavior, or is the diagnosis broader than that?
The diagnosis is much more terrifying because it includes the good things in our lives.
The good things.
Yeah. Owen explicitly warns that an earnestness of spirit regarding the lawful occasions of life can completely obstruct communion with Christ.
Lawful occasions. So we are talking about running a business, raising children, paying taxes, maintaining a home.
Good, necessary structural components of human existence.
How can doing good things be an obstruction?
It becomes an obstruction when it dictates the habitual frame of the soul.
Explain that a bit more.
If your mind is entirely consumed by an earnestness of spirit for temporal survival or success, even lawful success, it leaves no cognitive or spiritual bandwidth for the eternal.
Oh, wow.
When good things demand the ultimate allegiance of your mental energy, they function as barriers.
So they take the place of the main thing.
Yeah. Owen is asking a diagnostic question here. When your mind is in neutral, when the immediate task is finished, where do your thoughts drift?
Do they rove back into the anxieties of the earth?
Or do they possess an active inclination to seek upward?
So how do we break the habitual roving? What is the practical mechanism for achieving this holy composure?
Owen states it requires spiritual principles and an active decision to seek refreshment in heavenly things.
An active decision.
Yes, and the language he uses is highly instructive. He tells us to bathe the soul in the fountain of these truths.
Bathe the soul.
Yeah. Think about it. A quick, obligatory reading of a theological concept is like splashing water on your face.
Right.
Bathing implies immersion. It requires lingering.
It demands that you let the realities of this eternal rescue mission soak into the very pores of your consciousness.
Yes, until it begins to dictate your reactions to earthly anxieties.
The distinction between splashing and bathing is convicting,
It really is.
but it leads to a very practical hurdle.
What is that?
If a listener actually carves out the time, silences the phone, and attempts to bathe their soul,
Right.
what exactly are they supposed to think about?
Right, the actual content of the meditation.
Because many people sit down to meditate, their mind goes completely blank, and they end up repeating the same 5 generic religious phrases they learned in childhood.
And Owen violently opposes that kind of mental laziness.
He does not hold back.
No, he warns us not to be satisfied with general notions of the love of Christ.
A general notion.
Yes, a general notion is an abstract, empty concept that presents no actual glory to the mind.
It allows us to profess that we value his love without having any distinct conception of what it actually is or how it operates.
Exactly.
It's the difference between looking at the structural blueprint of a massive ancient cathedral and actually standing inside the nave while the choir sings and the light hits the stained glass.
That is a great way to picture it.
The blueprint gives you the general notion that a building exists. Standing inside it is the actual experience.
And Owen says we need to move from the blueprint to the building through what he calls peculiar meditations.
Specific, highly detailed, relentlessly focused thoughts.
Yes. And he provides a precise 4-point framework for these meditations.
Okay, let's walk through those 4 points.
The first point of meditation is to consider whose love it is.
Whose love it is.
Yes, we must constantly anchor our minds on the infinite majesty of the divine person of the Son of God.
Because the value of the love is inextricably tied to the dignity of the person offering it.
Exactly.
The second point is to meditate on by what ways it acts.
Which requires us to trace the mechanics we discussed earlier.
Right, the distinct actions of the divine nature in its eternal decree and the human nature in its temporal acts of bleeding and suffering.
We have to meditate on the specific historical and theological execution of the mission.
So it's not just a vague feeling, it's specific actions.
Yes. Now, the third point is perhaps the most difficult for the modern mind to accept.
Okay, what is it?
Owen says we must meditate on the freedom of this love.
The freedom.
And the only way to accurately meditate on its freedom is to realize that we deserved absolute hatred, not love.
Oh, wow.
He calls this state of mind self-abasement, and he argues it is the absolute best frame of mind for contemplating the glory of Christ.
Let's stop and analyze that, because modern psychology aggressively recoils at the concept of self-abasement.
Oh, absolutely.
We are constantly instructed to build our self-esteem, to recognize our inherent worth, to validate our own goodness.
That is the cultural air we breathe.
If you tell someone today that the best way to achieve mental and spiritual health is to realize they deserve divine hatred, they will call you toxic.
They will.
Why does Owen insist this is the necessary lens for seeing glory?
Because it is the only logically consistent way to measure the magnitude of the rescue.
Measure the magnitude.
Think about it. If the defining characteristic of this divine love is its utter freeness, the fact that it had no moving cause, no provocation from our inherent worth, then the only way to accurately gauge its size is to accurately gauge our own unworthiness.
That makes perfect sense.
If you believe you are essentially a good person who made a few mistakes and just needed a little spiritual assistance, then Christ's love is nothing more than a polite favor.
It's just a courteous assist.
Right.
And a polite favor does not generate eternal worship. It generates a brief thank you.
Exactly. But if you stare into the reality of the catastrophe, if you recognize the total active enmity of your fallen state and embrace the self-abasement Owen prescribes, then the polite favor vanishes.
In its place, you see a staggering, mighty stream of grace surging against the ultimate opposition.
The darker the background of human depravity, the brighter the star of divine love shines.
Self-abasement is not about self-hatred.
No.
It is about accurate self-assessment in the light of absolute holiness.
That
reframes the entire concept.
It does. And that brings us to the fourth and final point of peculiar meditation, which is to look at its efficacy in fruits and effects.
So what it actually does.
Yes. We are to meditate on what this love actually accomplishes in real time. The justification of the guilty, the sanctification of the corrupt, the preservation of the soul, and the guarantee of eternal life.
And Owen brings all of this intense intellectual architecture to a very sensory conclusion.
He really does.
He states that knowing these 4 points intellectually is not the final goal. Having the right theological framework in your mind is insufficient unless you attain a gracious taste of it in your heart.
A gracious taste. He compares it to seeing a magnificent feast richly prepared on a table, but refusing to actually sit down and eat.
He insists a spiritual sensation is required.
Christ must become the meat and the bread of our souls.
If we do not find a genuine, satisfying relish of this love in our affections, we will not be able to retain the intellectual notion of it in our minds.
The rigorous theological framework is absolutely necessary to protect us from error.
Right.
And the peculiar meditations are the vehicle that drives our focus.
But the ultimate destination is a spiritual, satisfying taste of the divine reality.
Yes, that is the goal.
So let's synthesize the sheer weight of what we've examined today.
Let's do it.
We started by tracing the architecture of redemption back to the Father's eternal disposing cause.
A love that designed the mechanism of our rescue without approving of our hostile state.
We analyzed the terrifying catastrophe of humanity falling from the image of God into active enmity, yet retaining a recoverable nature unlike the fallen angels.
We watched the Son's internal disposition move from pity to an incomprehensible delight.
A delight fueled entirely by the infinite goodness of his own self-sufficient nature.
We then looked at the violent collision of that delight with the massive opposition of divine justice.
We examined the necessity of the prepared body, the precise mechanics of the 2 distinct natures operating within one divine person, allowing infinite value to be assigned to the shedding of mortal blood.
And we brought it all down to the Tuesday afternoon reality of our roving minds.
We confronted the danger of lawful distractions, the necessity of bathing our souls rather than splashing them, and the requirement of self-abasement to truly taste the feast.
I want to leave you with a final thought to examine long after this audio stops playing.
Please do.
We discussed Christ's love rising like the waters of a mighty stream against the ultimate, terrifying opposition of bearing infinite wrath. He pursued his delight to save you until he had absolutely no pity left for himself.
Wow.
If you firmly grasp the cosmic, bloody reality of what he faced and conquered for you, how does that alter the way you process the minor oppositions, the daily anxieties, and the temporary discomforts in your own life?
Does knowing that his love is a present, active, and costly feast change what your mind will hunger for tomorrow morning?
That is the question.
Will you continue to let your thoughts rove aimlessly into the anxious corners of the earth, or will you actively fight to bathe your soul in the staggering reality of his glory?
It changes the entire trajectory of your existence when you stop settling for a general notion and fight for the gracious taste.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive for reformed thinking. Keep your minds composed and keep thinking.